Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday. Um, Currently, there's nobody in the room here except me. That's why I don't have the mask on. But I see there's lots of you online, so I'm going to say good morning to you, and then we'll get going. Okay. So Reza's here. Good morning, Reza. Basil's here. Good morning, Basil. Hamad is here. Good morning, Hamad. Basil's here. Good morning, Basil. Malika is here. Good morning, Malika. Awais is here. Good morning, Awais. And Hassan is here. Good morning to you. So, just a quick reminder that we're going to do a quiz on Friday, and so I put the what classes are covered by the quiz into Microsoft Teams so that you can look at that, and that's what we'll do. That's what we'll do Friday morning. The appropriate lecture slides are uploaded on Student Portal, so you can see them there. So study hard. We'll probably have to talk about the last quiz a little bit later today, but I'm gonna see if we can get some more people here, and then we'll have a conversation about it. Okay. So let's jump in, and here we were. So we were talking about religious oppression yesterday, and we talked a little bit about. I'm just going to go back. We talked a little bit about a case involving Trinity Western University, and it was an interesting case because, as you saw, people's charter rights, so the rights guaranteed to them by the Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms, those rights were kind of in conflict, right? And so the contract that Trinity Western University made their staff and students sign suggested that they weren't allowed to have any sexual intimacy outside of the bounds of marriage between a man and a woman, right? And so that sort of discriminated against people who were single and wanted to, good morning, and wanted to have sexual intercourse with people. And it also discriminated against people who were, who were LGBTQ, right? Who were gay or lesbian, even if they were married to a same-sex partner. And so it so the community covenant or the contract from the university appeared to discriminate against these people, and when the law associations of BC and Ontario said that they weren't going to recognize the graduates of Trinity Western's law school or law program, then the university felt that it was being discriminated against based on its religious views, right? And so the whole thing kind of went to court. It was kind of a long legal battle. It went to the Supreme Court of Canada, and the Supreme Court of Canada agreed with the law associations, right? And so we were kind of talking yesterday about what you thought about whether or not, good morning, about whether or not you agreed with that or not. And I think people were a little hesitant to kind of commit to one thing or another. But I did try to explain to you that the Supreme Court sort of made the ruling based on, in part, sometimes you look at who is most vulnerable, right, and who needs more protection. And again, in Canada, Christians are a majority, not a majority, but a dominant group, right? And so maybe they are in need of less protection. The other thing, of course, that comes into play here is that without that community covenant, or without that requirement that people sign it, people are still free to practice their faith, right? And so if Trinity Western students and staff want to ensure that they have no sexual intimacy outside of the bounds of marriage between a man and a woman, then they are allowed to do that, right? There's the charter guarantees that they're allowed to do that, but they're not allowed to discriminate against anyone else on the basis of their beliefs. And so they don't have to agree with people having sex outside of marriage, and they don't have to agree with homosexuality, but they can't discriminate, right? And that's where this case kind of turned. Although, as you might have noticed, the Supreme Court voted 7-2, and so the Supreme Court agreed with the law associations, but not every Supreme Court judge did, right? Two of them did not. And so it's a difficult case, right? And it depends on what kind of things you think are, more important, right? Who deserves more protection, whose rights are, whose rights kind of take precedence. And, again, usually we don't get into conflicts like that. Usually people, some people exercising their rights doesn't interfere with the rights of others. But again, sometimes it does, right? And we need to sort it out. And ultimately, the courts and the Supreme Court are the ones that make those decisions, right? And so, as kind of an aftermath to that, if you want to know, Trinity Western was forced to, I think they kept the community covenant roughly the same, but they made it voluntary. So they kind of encourage you to sign it, but they can't make you sign it. And so if you choose not to, that's fine, right? So that was kind of the resolution to that story. But again, it was in the courts, right? And it went all the way to the top. Yeah, okay. So that's a little recap of that. So we talked about that. We talked about Trinity Western yesterday. I'm just going to kind of skip through this because we've seen it already. Because this is what I want to get to today. And this is a little bit of a different case study, I guess. And it has to do, I'm going to put my feet up and tell you a little story. So it goes back a few years, okay? And it goes back a few years in France. And if you know this story or if you remember it, you can let me know. But what had happened was there was a French magazine, and the magazine in France was called Charlie Hebdo. And I'm going to put it in the live chat just so you can see here. Charlie Hebdo. There we go. That was the name of the magazine. And the magazine published some silly cartoons, okay? And in the cartoons, there were some religious figures kind of in silly situations. And so I think Jesus was there, and maybe Buddha was there. And also Prophet Muhammad was there as well, okay? And of course, most of France didn't really take any notice of these cartoons. If they read the magazine, they probably saw them and was like, aha, whatever, and didn't think anything of it. But the Muslim community was upset about the cartoons and was deeply offended. And so I'm no expert in Islam, but as far as I'm aware, Prophet Muhammad cannot be depicted as a physical person, right? You can write about him and talk about him, but you cannot generate an image of him, right? And so Muslims were pretty upset because not only had this magazine done that, they'd used images of Prophet Muhammad, but they'd kind of put him into very kind of silly, kind of undignified situations, right? So the Muslim community was upset. Some people took it upon themselves to vandalize the offices of Charlie Hebdo, and it was there was kind of a big kind of uproar about it. And again, at the time there was kind of a collision of rights, right? The right to freedom of speech, right? To be able to sort of write and publish what you want, and of course, the right of Muslims not to be kind of discriminated against or offended for no reason, kind of thing. And again, not being offended that's not a right that's protected in the charter. And again, I don't know what France's Charter of Rights and Freedoms looks like. But again, in the process of trying to create a country in which there's many different types of people, and yet we all have to kind of live together and work together and cooperate, there was the question of, did Charlie Hebdo, did the magazine go too far, right? Should they have not publish these images, right? It was their right to do so, right? It was freedom of speech. I don't think you would consider it hate speech. I don't think that's quite what it is, but it was offensive to, to a portion of the community. And so there was a lot of questions about, again, whether the magazine should have published the images. And again, some people felt that no, they shouldn't have. They should have known that this would be offensive to Muslims. Why would they do such a thing? Other people stood up for free speech and said, you can say whatever you want, and if people are offended, well, that's their issue, right? There's no law that protects people from being offended, right? So there was a bit of an uproar about that, and then the issue kind of died down. Good morning, Jesse. The issue kind of died down. Now, this article is from last year because the cartoons kind of resurfaced again, and so where they resurfaced is in a classroom. And so in a classroom much like this one, probably with more students in it, but that's beside the point. A civics teacher, like a history or a social studies teacher, was trying to have Hamad, I'll get to your question in a second there, I see it. A history teacher was having a discussion on free speech, right, on rights and freedoms. And so as a result, or not as a result, but in the process of that, he showed the cartoons to his class. Now, he had a few Muslim students in the class, and prior to showing the images, he said to them, if you will be offended, or if this is going to offend you, you can leave the room for a little while we do this. You're allowed to do that. Okay, so he did that. The images were shown, the cartoons were shown to the class. A discussion on free speech continued, and the class ended, and that was it. But I guess news spread of this teacher who did this lesson and showed the cartoons in class, and then in retaliation for showing those images, a man kind of confronted the teacher on the street and cut his head off. Yeah. And so again, as you can imagine, there was a bit of a explosion. People were talking about it quite a bit. And so what I want to talk about is that whole issue, right? The issue of those cartoons, what can be shown, what free speech is about, and how do we protect people's rights, right? Again, especially in a country like Canada that's very multicultural, right? We have lots of different cultures, ethnicities, religions, and one way or another, we have to find a way to cooperate and get along, right? Canada's only going to be successful if everyone, feels included and feels respected, right? So I think maybe there's some lessons for Canada in this issue, okay? So what the article here is about is the article takes place after the killing of this teacher, and it talks about how people are, in this case, how people are viewing the teacher, right? And so again, the first time the focus was on Charlie Hebdo, the magazine. Now the question is more focused on the teacher himself, but we can talk about the magazine if you want, okay? So what I'll do then is I will turn you loose for a few minutes to read the article. The article's in Microsoft Teams. It's called France's Teachers Find Classrooms Are Minefields in Debate About Official Secularism and Colleagues Killing, okay? So I'll give you some, good morning Ryan, I'll give you some time to read that, and then we'll talk about these three questions here. What is the issue? So what rights are kind of bumping into each other? Are people's rights being violated, and how? And then how can we understand this issue, or what are our thoughts on this issue? Okay. And again, Hamad, I'll come back to your question just in a little bit when we start talking, okay? Because I think it's a good question and it's relevant, okay? So let's read for a little bit. I'll put some time on the clock and then we'll discuss. few more minutes, okay? And then we'll talk. Okay, just one more minute. One more minute. Okay, people. So, this is a bit of a, like they say, this is a bit of a minefield, right? What's the discussion here? What are people debating in this article? What are some of the things people are talking about? They're talking about secularism? Yes, good Lord. What is that? What is secularism? Secularism. There it is. Hopefully I've spelled that right. There's no autocorrect on my streaming software, so. What is secularism? Right. So it's the idea that the state, the government, the thing that runs your country should be separate from the church or the religious part of society, right? So you shouldn't have religion interfering with and running the state, right? They should be separate. And of course, historically speaking, they haven't always been, right? Sometimes the church and the state are kind of married to each other and, sort of cooperate or fight with each other. In many countries today, the church or religion itself is integrated into the state. But in many countries, those things are reasonably separate, right? And it seems that France is making, really sees itself as a secular country, a country that governs itself and religion is kind of over on the side, right? Not interfering. So yeah, they're talking about secularism, the principle of secularism, which in France they seem to be calling laïcité, I think. I don't speak French, unfortunately. What else are they talking about? Or maybe I'll rephrase. Right? So this idea, the sort of open question about whether this teacher should be considered a hero or not, right? What else is being discussed? Principle of secularism. Is this teacher a hero? What else? Other questions or things that come up in here? Or is that it? Okay, well, let's start with that one. Let's start with that. So we have a country here in France. We have France, a country that is trying to be secular, right? Trying to govern itself without the influence of religion. But what do you think? How should we think about this teacher? Is he a hero? Well, I mean, all teachers are heroes. I mean, right? But is he a hero? Right.
And the fact that
The magazine, Charlie Hebdo.
I'm pretty sure their main objective, while posting the pictures, was to create chaos. Because why would you even do that? You don't see any other countries in the Middle East post any cartoons, inappropriate naked cartoons of other religious figures.
Yeah.
So if you're just posting that, that's basically provoked towards chaos.
Right. So there's a couple of questions here, right? As to, not only is this teacher a hero, but, what is the purpose of showing these images, right? It's pretty clear that they are, offensive to the Muslim community, right? Even if you didn't know that, you probably knew it after the Charlie Hebdo incident, right? Because it blew up, right? So teacher knew that, showed the images anyway, right? And again, like Rafay, like you point out, we don't see Muslim countries doing the same thing, right? That's good. What else? Other thoughts? Is this teacher a hero? Did he do the right thing? How should we understand the killer, right? The person who killed him? And then what's going on in French society kind of as a whole? Oof, lots of good questions. What's going on in French society here as a whole?
I mean, they just are moving towards Islamophobe.
they're moving towards?
Islamophobic just because of one guy acting out his feelings. Because I heard the news and everything, they banned the hijab in Europe, especially in France. Even the meat, the way we eat it, it's like all the shops actually closed. And I'm pretty sure the mosques and everything are closed as well.
So, sorry, the mosques are closed for what reason?
Yeah, like this week, they just want to, how do I say this? Minimize the, what do you say? I don't know how to put it.
Like religious expression or
Yes,
like
yes.
visible religion?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of Hamad. That's what Hamad's question was kind of linked to, the idea that the European Union had allowed employers. Hang on, I got the wording right here because I looked it up. I saw it in the news this morning, and it says that the European Union top court has ruled that employers may forbid the wearing of visible symbols of religious or political beliefs, such as headscarves. The ban corresponds to a genuine need on the part of the employer, may be justified by the employer's need to present a neutral image toward customers or to prevent social disputes. So that's what the top court in the European Union has said, is that employers may ban religious symbols, including hijab, right? And so Hamad's question is, well, isn't that free speech, or at least free expression, right? Are you allowed to express yourself freely, or are you not, right? Or does it depend on your race or ethnicity or religion, right? Are only some people allowed to express themselves freely and others must censor themselves, right? Which is a good question, Hamad. How can you promote free speech on the one hand and then limit people's freedom to express themselves religiously on the other, right? It's a good question. What do they say about France's 6 million Muslims, they estimate?
They may be motivating people in string of terrorist attack targeting the country.
Say that again, they're playing up.
A motivating role in the string of terrorist attacks targeting the country.
I don't know that the Muslim population is motivating it, but they are. It seems like they're increasingly being blamed for it, right? They said in the article there's been a switch, right? If a terror attack occurs that is connected to a Muslim or Islamic ideas, they say in the past the government has been very quick to say, this person doesn't represent the Muslim community, this is just a single individual, right? But they say now government officials aren't saying that anymore, right? They're not trying to separate, one person out from the community itself. And so now it's starting to look as if the community is the problem, not individual people, right? Maybe I'll just dive in and ask this. What do you think? Who is in the right and who is in the wrong here? Was the teacher wrong? Is the government wrong to make this guy a hero? Is the murderer wrong? I mean, personally, I have I have some problems with people cutting the heads off teachers for obvious reasons, but
No one is allowed to kill. It literally says in the Quran that a man kills if a man kills one man, like if you kill one man, it's as if you killed the whole humankind.
so there's a very clear. So it's interesting how these ideas about jihads and holy wars and terrorist attacks are all used, and Islamic teaching and the Quran is used to justify those things, when in fact you've pointed out that the Quran specifically says that you you may not kill anyone, right? You are not allowed. If you kill someone, it's as if you're killing all of humankind. Yeah. So the murder of one person is a massive crime in the eyes of Allah, right? And so it's interesting how some people are using it as a justification when in fact the Quran clearly says that it's a no-no, right? What else? Do you think the teacher did the right thing? Or did the teacher do a wrong thing? What did he do that was wrong or right? Okay, well, maybe I'll show them to you now and we'll see. No, I'm not going to show them to you. Why am I not going to show them to you? Because what?
It's not appropriate. It's basically like saying, because Prophet Muhammad is like a father, like basically an equal as a father and mother, like a parent to us.
Yeah.
For every Muslim. So if we say, I'm going to show you funny naked pictures as mentioned of your parents.
Yeah.
That's like extremely provoking.
Yeah. So these cartoons that are extremely provoking and upsetting to Muslims, right? But it's okay, don't worry, because I'll show you some images of Prophet Muhammad, but I'll show you some funny images of like Jesus as well. So it'll all be okay. It'll all be even. Is it even? Does that make it better? Why not?
Because Jesus in our religion, he's like a really big character.
Yeah.
So even
He,
if you
he,
show his,
he plays a supporting role, whereas he's more the lead role in Christianity. But anyway.
So it's like if we show funny pictures of him as well, we're gonna get offended.
Sure.
Because I mean, he's the one who's gonna end the Antichrist.
Right. Or maybe okay, well I'll show a funny picture of Ganesha, right? The Hindu god. Is that okay then? Does that make it okay? Why not?
You just cannot show pictures making fun of someone's religious idea.
True, right? I cannot making fun of everyone doesn't necessarily make it okay to make fun of a particular group, right? And again, I think maybe it didn't land the way I was hoping it to, but the other thing is that and maybe I messed up because of course Jesus appears in Islamic teaching as well, but you know, in Christianity, is there any prohibition against showing Jesus as a physical human being? No, right? We see him all the time. We've seen pictures of him already, right? With the white guy with the hair and the beard and the white robes. We know what he looks like. There's no prohibition about depicting Jesus, right? So you can't say, oh, well, yes, I'll show Prophet Muhammad, but I'll show Jesus too, and then it's okay, because it's not the same thing, right? You're not really breaking the rule, in Christianity anyway. You're not really breaking the rule with Christianity. We can show a depiction of Jesus with no problem, and we often do, but it's not the same in Islam, right? So you're not doing the same thing, right? So yeah, I'm not going to show them to you because I know that, you know, they are offensive to some people, right? I've seen them. I can actually see how they'd be offensive because they're really poking fun at religion and at race and all kinds of things. I can see how they'd be upsetting. I'm not sure how funny they are. They seem kind of juvenile, but whatever. What's the other question? Oh, but the teacher excused the Muslim students, right? He said you can leave the room and, you know, go to the library or something. But was that the right thing to do?
I mean, if I was a teacher, I would show them in the first place.
True. True. So it's hard to when when you've already decided that he's made a mistake, it's hard to think about this thing. But was that a good move or not? To excuse them? Definitely true. Definitely true. But let me suggest something to you, is that one of the things the article said is that France is struggling to integrate its population of Muslims, right? There's 6 million Muslims in France who are, kind of living in their own communities, right, next to other Muslim families, and they're struggling to kind of integrate, right? They're struggling to, get good employment. They're struggling to kind of integrate themselves into society. And again, I'm not saying assimilate, but they're having trouble being successful in French society. And one of the reasons why might have something to do with this prejudice against Muslims, which I imagine many French people hold. But if you're going to talk about free speech and secularism and laicite and all these things, and then you have some Muslim students who themselves are, kind of maybe not integrating well into society, is it a good idea to remove them from the conversation, right? This is just the kind of conversation that they should be a part of, right? Not only for their sake, but for the non-Muslim French students, right? This is a perfect opportunity for these two groups to talk about how they feel, right? And what they value and what they experience in society, what it's like to be, what it's like to be French and what it's like to be a Muslim living in France, right? This is a perfect opportunity for those two groups to talk to each other. But by showing the cartoons, not only is it offensive and very kind of polarizing, but it actually removed Muslims from the conversation when they should have been there. Did you want to say something, or is your hand just there? It's just there? Okay. Yeah, so, from a teaching perspective, I would say that, first of all, I think it was a mistake to show them. Because do you need to see the images to have a conversation about them? We're having a conversation about them now. I didn't show them, right? If you are really interested in seeing them, you guys know how to use Google, right? You can go and find them if you want. I don't need to put them on the screen, right? But we can have a conversation about them without seeing them, right? And again, I think we talked about this with microaggressions, right? Where we talked about this with internalized dominance and internalized oppression, is that, the dominant group doesn't get to define what is offensive or painful for the minoritized group, right? It's like if somebody punches you in the face, right? The person who punches you doesn't get to tell you whether it hurts or not, right? The person who gets punched in the face is the one who says, hey, that hurts, don't do that, right? And so putting the images on the screen basically starts a conversation about, well, are these offensive or not to French eyes? And the question is irrelevant, right? Because we already know that it hurts, right? We already know that it's offensive to French Muslims, right? And non-French or non-Muslim French people, they don't need to debate that, right? They don't need to look at the cartoons and say, well, let me look at them and see if I see anything offensive. You won't, right? And again, I looked at them and, they don't really bother me that much, right? But of course not. I'm not a Muslim, right? The debate is not, do Western eyes find these offensive? The debate is done. We already know that they're offensive, right? And so the question is what is the point of presenting these images, right? What is the point of showing them, right? The magazine, Charlie Hebdo, thought they were doing it for fun, right? They thought they're doing it for laughs. But of course, some people don't find it funny. Now again, whether they're allowed to do that is maybe kind of a different thing, right? Because to some degree, if you don't want to read the magazine, don't read it, right? Don't pick it up, don't look at it, right? But school is a little bit different because you all are required to be here, even though some of you are not. you're all required to be here, right? You don't get to choose whether to come to civics class. You are just supposed to come to it, right? And so, again, the teacher has to be a little more cautious about what he puts in front of these kids because they don't entirely have a choice. The magazine, you can just choose not to look at it, right? And again, I'm not justifying the magazines thing. I'm just putting the magazine on the side and saying for the school, you don't get a choice, right? You are stuck in this class and you're stuck looking at whatever I put on the screen. And so I have to be thoughtful about that, right? And again, is there a point to showing these images just to have a conversation when in fact we are having a conversation right now and we didn't have to do that? I didn't have to offend anyone. And again, you want to see them? Google them. I can't stop you, right? Do what you want, but I don't need to show them. But that said, we can't condone the murder of this person either because killing people is wrong, right? It's wrong in the Quran, it's wrong in the Bible, and I'm pretty sure it's wrong in terms of French legal code, right? You're not allowed to kill people, right? Especially in a very gruesome, horrible way, right? But Awais, you said it's sentimental. Can you just define that? What you meant? Because maybe I don't think I saw your comment at the right time, so I'm not sure. What do you mean? What was sentimental? So, yeah, this is a tricky one, right? Why is the French government trying to talk about this guy as a hero? Why do they want to make him a hero? Okay. Yeah.
So it's basically trying to show that Muslims are like that.
Yeah.
You should increase our personality, bring it down.
Right. So framing this guy as a hero, right? We talked about that in sexism, right? Where we said the Big Bang Theory nerds were framed as harmless, right? They were presented as harmless. Here we're seeing not a character, but a real life guy framed as a hero, right? And again, what does it mean? If he's a hero, then the person who brutally murdered him is the villain, right? And again, by not making a distinction between an individual and a community, who's the villain here, right? Muslims. And so now we have kind of a polarization, right? We have a binary opposition. We have two categories. There's us and them. There's the French and then there's the Muslims, right? And again, is this going to lead to a good outcome, to further push these two groups apart? We're already seeing that we have, a pretty big population. I mean, there's a lot of people living in France, but 6 million people is a lot of people. There's a lot of Muslims in France who are struggling to be successful in French society, struggling to integrate. And again, is this helpful, right? Is it helpful to frame this guy as a hero, right? Showing the pictures of the prophet. That's what Awais meant. Yeah. It's not something that. Yeah, I understand. And again, it's interesting too. Are you okay? Sore arm? You gotta dial it down at the gym. You're tearing yourself apart there, my friend. What this article is talking about is I think it's the wrong question, right? Whether or not he's a hero doesn't really, that's not the question, right? The question is, what is the purpose of images like this? To what degree should we, be careful about offending other groups, right? Particularly minoritized groups. And again, how do we, better integrate minoritized groups into the population, right? How do we support them? How do we make sure that they have what they need, right? Whether he's a hero or not is not the question, right? Because he's not, right? He's a regular guy who didn't make a very good choice and unfortunately suffered an awful consequence for it, right? And that's not right, right? He didn't do the, you know, I would argue he made a mistake. He made a couple of mistakes. But again, you know, you shouldn't be murdered for such a thing, right? So we can't condone the murder of this guy, but I'm not sure that he did the right thing, right? But then again, sometimes teachers don't, right? Sometimes they make a little error in judgment. Sometimes they think something will go a certain way and it goes another way. It's tough to know, right? But again, whether he's a hero is not not the question, right? The question is, to what degree should we, you know, take care not to offend other people, right? And
So you have to look from a community perspective.
it's true, right? You should attempt to imagine how other people will respond, right? And certainly, you know, we've all been on social media. I mean, people get offended by everything, right? you show a picture of your dog and they're like, "Oh, you hate cats now?" Right? So people get offended about all kinds of things. But again, you know, some things are more sensitive than others, right? And again, if you're trying to build an inclusive society, if you're trying to build one where everyone feels welcome and supported, you know, is it a good idea to show these cartoons? Probably not, right? Are they worth showing? Are they, you know, some things offend people, but they're worth showing, right? They're worth talking about, right? Some people are offended by climate change, but it's worth talking about, right? And so here, is it worth offending Muslims and making them unhappy and making them feel threatened or unsecure in their homes? Is that worth it for a little haha? Again, I'm not sure that they're that funny, but you know, is it worth it for a little haha? Right? Is it worth offending Muslims and actually excluding them from a good conversation in class so that you can show images that you don't need to show? You can just tell people to Google it if they want to see it. I don't know, right? And again, but you can see what so often happens in a situation like this is that people, you know, people frame the image to champion their own cause, right? And so for people who, you know, want to vilify Muslims, yeah, they'll frame this guy as a hero, right? Because again, it makes the Muslim community look like the bad guys, right? And again, there's one bad guy here. Whatever he was motivated by, I think you have to probably have some kind of mental disturbance to cut someone's head off for anything. Like that's, I can't imagine ever doing that. And so I think there's a problem with this guy just on his own, nothing to do with religion. But yeah, again, what should be shown and what shouldn't be, right? And yeah, you can, with freedom of speech, you can say what you want, but it doesn't mean there aren't consequences, right? And again, not everything needs to be said, right? Just because you can say something doesn't mean you need to, right? Just because you are legally allowed to publish cartoons of Prophet Muhammad in France doesn't mean that it's really a good idea, right? But you may also disagree with me there. But again, it's a complicated thing, and it looks like in France here, the situation is not improving, right? People are becoming more divided, more polarized. It's more us versus them, right? And again, that can't be the way it is, right? That can't be the way it is. Okay, you want to take a little break? We kind of went a little bit long there, but that's okay. Let's take a break. We'll do some last thoughts on this. We'll finish up religious oppression, and then we'll see where we are. Okay? All right. Okay, and we're back. So, again, you can see that there's a lot of ideas connected to this aspect of religious oppression, right? Certainly, the teacher and Charlie Hebdo have the right to publish cartoons featuring Prophet Muhammad, but of course, we know those things are offensive to Muslim communities, right? And again, it's not, it is not a charter right in Canada, and probably not in France either. It's not a charter right that can't be offended, right? There's no right that protects you taking offense, right? You can, in society you can go around and offend people all day long, right? People may not like you for it, but you can do it, right? But again, here, even though there's not a real conflict between rights, there is the idea of not imposing limits on free speech, like in terms of hate speech, but should people limit their own free speech, right? Is there, just because you can say something, does that mean that you should, right? Is there a good reason to say this, right? And here we have something that we know is going to offend Muslims, and Charlie Hebdo published the cartoons, for a laugh, he, right? Again, I don't know if the cartoons are funny. They don't look super funny to me, but that's just my sense of humor, I guess, right? But is it worth it to offend all these people who are already struggling in society so that you can have a little laugh, right? Or is it worth putting the images on screen in a classroom and offending your students, or driving your students away when you're going to talk about something that involves them, right? And is an important sort of aspect of their life, right? So that doesn't really make any sense either. So again, this isn't so much of a rights violation as it is what is the purpose of using that free speech? Why are you using your freedom of speech or freedom of expression, right? And so, anything else we should talk about regarding this particular case? The teacher, the murderer, the framing of the teacher as a hero, framing of the Muslim community as villains, the idea of secularism.
I like how these two countries, they retaliated in a non-violent way by this boycotting French products.
Yep.
I think so that cost France a lot of millions of dollars, right?
Could be. Yeah. So and the publishing of those cartoons had negative economic effects then for France, right? And so again, just what is the purpose of it, right? Again, just because you can say something doesn't mean that you should, right? And again, sometimes it's worth offending people, right? Some people, again, they're going to have different views than you, and sometimes things need to be said, and sometimes other people are going to be offended. And you know what? Too bad, right? But again, I'm not sure that this is that case, right? I'm not sure that this is a case where, Muslims needed to be offended so that we could have these cartoons, right? I don't think that's worth it. But, yeah. Anything else we should talk about in connection to the issues in this article? The teacher, the murderer, the students, Muslim community, France. Is there a lesson here for Canada? Is there something we can learn from this? Don't publish offensive cartoons. I don't know.
Before saying something, posting something, think about the consequences and view the scenario from someone else's perspective.
Yeah.
From that.
Okay, so before you say something, before you publish something, before you post something, right? Think about how other people will perceive it, right? And again, sometimes, just because someone's offended doesn't mean that what you're saying is wrong, but, in this case, is it worth it? Is it worth offending, an entire religion for this purpose, right? Okay, so let's tie this up. This has been a very short unit. But again, one of the things that when we talk about forms of oppression, racism and sexism and heterosexism are kind of more, I guess people are talking about them a little more in society. Disableism or ableism, people are not really talking about and probably should. And religious oppression is one that's also a little less on people's radar. And so I'm spending a little less time on it. And probably because it's not quite as strong of a force in North American culture as maybe racism or sexism is. But anyway, so like we said, religious oppression, it's an oppression like any others. A dominant group is able to, because they have social and institutional and historical power, they're able to enforce their prejudices on society, right? They're able to create a society that works for them, right? And again, a passing of a law here, where, or in the European Union, where they make it okay to ban religious symbols, for a lot of Europeans, that's just fine, right? Because again, most European religions don't require you to wear any religious symbols, right? Most of kind of white European people are Christian, right? And sometimes Christian people wear a little cross, right? But you don't have to. The religion doesn't require you to do it. And so, if people say, oh, well, okay, no more religious symbols in public, for most white Europeans, that's an easy rule to follow, right? But again, for people from other parts of the world, that's not quite so easy, right? But again, if you're in the dominant group, you can create, a society that works for you, right? That's easy for you to exist in, and that's kind of what's happening here with this Muslim, with this ability to ban hijab in the European Union, right? So it's very easy for white European people not to worry about this, but then Muslims do have to worry about it. Let's see, right? So we said that according to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, people cannot be discriminated against based on their religion. But we've also said that some religions are kind of more vulnerable than others because they're more visible than others. And again, it's those religious symbols that mark people in society as members of that religion. And I think that's what they're meant to do originally, right? You're meant to sort of show that you are a member of that faith by those religious symbols. But in a different society, it kind of marks you as different, right? And so if there are people who have prejudicial ideas against different religions, if there's people who are going to discriminate or to say hurtful things, those people are going to be more of a target just because they're more visible, right? They're more easily seen. Again, when we talked about Trinity Western, we said that people's beliefs are protected, right? People's religious beliefs are protected, and the practicing of those beliefs is protected as well, but that doesn't give you the right to discriminate based on those beliefs, right? So again, you can believe what you want, but you may not force other people to follow your beliefs, right? You may not discriminate because of what your beliefs say. And that was the Trinity Western thing. Again, sometimes people's rights can come into conflict because in exercising one person's rights, you cannot deny or infringe the rights of others, right? And so sometimes the government or the court steps in and does limit people's rights to some degree, right? And so, again, sometimes all rights have reasonable limits around them, right? Again, you can't say whatever you want. You cannot You can say whatever you want, but you may not engage in hate speech, right? That is a reasonable limit, right? Here with the cartoons, depending on who you might ask, you might say, well, this is a reasonable limit, right? Maybe you're not allowed to publish cartoons that are offensive to religious groups, right? Maybe we need that added protection, or maybe we don't, right? Maybe people need to, just use better judgment. I don't know. I'll leave that up to you. But again, there are limits to people's rights. Okie dokie. Any last words on religious oppression? Any last things that you want to talk about or want to say? Okay. Right. So here's what I want to do now. I think I talked about this very briefly yesterday, but maybe we didn't have enough time to deal with it. We're gonna have a quiz on Friday, right? From classes. I forget what classes I said. We're gonna have a quiz on Friday, but then we still have one more to do after that. And so, do you still want to do that last quiz in the last week of class? Not the last week, the second last week of class? Or would you like to move that 5% that the quiz is worth somewhere else? Or would you like to do an assignment instead? Assignment instead? Really? Really? Okay. Is that what people want? It sounded like a pretty solid. Okay. We'll do a short assignment instead of the last quiz. Okay. So I'll come up with that, and I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you next week at some time, maybe in the middle of the week or so. Okay. So we'll do that instead of the last quiz, because again, time is getting sort of tight. We've only got tomorrow and Friday, then we've got next week, and then we're into presentations. So we're going to be running out of time pretty quick. One more thing, I'll let you go a little bit earlier today, but one thing I should mention, I think there's an email going out to you, but we're having some work done in the alleyway behind the college. There's some water getting into the parkade, not much, but a little bit. So we're having repairs done to keep the water out, but that means we won't be able to go out the back door anymore, because there'll be people working there. So we're just going to go in and out through the front door, through the main door. And if you want to get up and down, you'll use the main stairs, the stairs in the atrium. So don't use the fire exits after today. We'll just use the regular front doors as we normally would have pre-COVID. Okay? Everybody cool with that? Me too. I hate going down the wrong stairs, and then you forget something, but the door locks behind you, and you're knocking, and there's nobody there, and then you got to go down, then you got to go up and around, and yeah. So we're not going to do that anymore. Just come in and out the front door. Coolio? Okay. That is it. You can pack it up, and I will see you tomorrow for classism.